Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for Thursday, March 14th. We got a 4-game slate on FanDuel, 6 games on Draftkings, and we're going to go over them all. But before we do that, come join us at LineStar. We got these promo offers right down below here, right on our pricing page. We got ParlayPlay, we got Sleeper, we got Underdog, we got Chalkboard. All of them can get you up to 1 free month of LineStar with a minimum deposit of $10. All you got to do is be a new customer to one of those sites, follow the rules that they lay out here, and use our promo code LineStar. All right, now let's get into it. It is an interesting slate. As I said, 6 games on DK. DK has the 7 o'clock games on the West Coast, and FanDuel does not. So we'll get into the games now. It looks like it's a pretty chalky slate. Going to be somewhat difficult to get away from the chalk as well. So Fred VanVleet coming at the highest owned, 8.1K. 50% owned, as he should be. He's in a great spot. I'm going to be getting to a lot of them. He's been really good lately, mid 40s, had a couple 50s in there, and I don't mind going back to him in a matchup versus the Wizards, who just aren't good at basketball. Jalen Green is going high owned too. I do prefer Fred VanVleet. It is noticeable, though, that Jalen Green's points line is at 22.5. When he's averaging only 18 points on the season. He does definitely get a bump up from no Alperen Sengun, as does VanVleet, but VanVleet is the one that I would rather of the two. Now, with the Bulls, Kobe White is going to be out, so it makes Io likely the starting point guard, Alex Caruso likely the starting shooting guard, and both of them are going to play a ton of minutes. They've already been playing a ton of minutes. But there is room for Caruso's minutes to go up and not really Io's. Io might get a minute or 2 extra. His big advantage here is now he's going to have the ball in his hand a lot more. He is a pretty good passer. So, he's going to be point guard. I don't mind going there. His usage definitely goes up a little bit. And I like Io, but I do prefer going Caruso. Just because, one, he has the upside from the steals and blocks and his defensive ability, and he has more upside in the fact that he could actually play more minutes. He is only averaging 31.3 minutes over the last 20, 30.2 over the last 5, and they could give him run like they did yesterday where he played 37. I wouldn't be that surprised if he's, 36 minutes today or 38 minutes today with Kobe White being out. The pivot I like, Damian Lillard. Look, he's still without Chris Middleton, and he's like a 1.3 fantasy per minute guy without Middleton. He's still sub 8 or 9K. So I definitely like him. Surprised ownership's not going there. The one thing is, obviously, there's big chances of a blowout here, and that is the downside. Milwaukee absolutely just blows him out, and he doesn't play enough minutes. However, you can't predict a blowout. Blowouts can happen late in the fourth quarter, and everybody gets their normal run. So I don't want to predict it, especially not in this slate where it's a small slate and very hard to get different. I will absolutely take my chances with a point guard that can break the slate, going a little lower owned. Now, on to point guard on DraftKings. Kyrie Irving is the name of the game here. There's no Luka Doncic. Kyrie will be the highest owned player on DraftKings. Or one of the highest owned, because Dante Exum is likely to be very high owned as well, and he's super cheap. Dante is probably going to slide into a starter spot, and at 3,600, that's pretty much a must play. If he's starting, I would expect, 28 plus minutes, and in that situation at 3,600 with the output that we've seen him, he's almost a lock button play. VanVleet still looks good. SGA looks good, 10.4K, and could get you a little different here. and we will move it on to the matchup tool. I am using the DraftKings matchup tool to show as much of those late games as possible. Drew Holiday, definitely looking good here. My issue with him is just his price point. He's 6.6K. There's no Porzingis, so it does give him a little bit of a bump, but I just think he's a little too high for his role on this team. Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, all a little interesting here. I do want to point out that Kyrie Irving actually doesn't have the best matchup, but he's going to get a giant usage bump. And so he is absolutely still playable, even though it is a poor matchup. Now, on to shooting guard. We got Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, and Torrey Craig. We do expect Torrey Craig to likely slide into the starting spot. He is going to be probably the small forward or power forward. Either way, it can work for Torrey Craig. And as long as he's playing, 24, 26 minutes, he can definitely hit value at his price. So I don't mind going there. Jalen Green, we talked about. Dillon Brooks, 4.5 is way too cheap. But as we talked about a couple days ago, Dillon Brooks being chalk is just scary because he can, no matter what who is out, he can just bomb because he lives and dies on his 3 for his fantasy points. So if the 3s aren't falling and he doesn't get a block or a steal or a couple blocks and steals, his fantasy points just aren't going to be there. So always a little scary going to Brooks, especially on a slate where there's so much value. I don't think you have to go to Brooks today. And he may be going a little bit over-owned. Alex Caruso is a big-time target of mine. Malik Beasley, if he plays, is interesting. He's much better without Chris Middleton, and he's getting solid minutes. And lower owned. He's very similar price to Brooks, but the floor is higher. Ceiling is about the same. Don't mind going to that pivot. Now, shooting guard on DK. We got Kyrie. We got Tim Hardaway. We got Amon Thompson. Tim Hardaway should get a ton of minutes without Doncic in, as he normally does without Doncic. So he at 4K becomes extremely interesting. Now, the one thing here is that Irving is going. Dante Exum is also live, so I expect him to still come off of the bench. But there is more competition here for usage and targets than we're used to with no Doncic and Hardaway playing. I do like Hardaway, and he just has a huge ceiling. I mean, he can give you 50 with Doncic not there at 4K. So definitely interesting and definitely on the radar to play. As is Exum, we talked about that too. So moving on to the matchups on shooting guard, we got Tyrese Maxey at the very top with Derek White and Dante DiVincenzo. Maxey's absolutely interesting. You're in a spot where he gets the boost up, no Milton, no Embiid, and now he's in a good matchup. So definitely do not mind going that way. Derek White, I do like better than Drew Holiday. Just don't love it. Getting to a little, but not a ton. Dante DiVincenzo, he is the guy I'm most worried about this Knicks team with Knicks getting healthy again. They tend to cut his minutes before others. Still played 34 yesterday, so you can still play him. He's just not guaranteed the shots that he was, without Brunson in the lineup. Now, moving on to small forward, we got Dillon Brooks, Corey Kispert, Denny Avdija, and Kyle Kuzma, all super high owned. I like them all. Like I've said, this slate is a chalky one. It is very hard to get different on FanDuel. There's just not a ton of guys that I like outside of the chalky guys. Kispert's been crushing in the absence or the Washington injury woes. The thing I have to say about him, though, is he's kind of like Dillon Brooks. If that shot's not falling, he's going to have a hard time giving you, 30-plus fantasy points. He hit 5 threes 2 games ago, 5 threes last game. Really hard to hit 5 threes every single game. So that's all I'm saying about that. Don't mind going there, though. I do like Denny. 7K is just getting pricey for him, but he does have the upside to make that pay off. And I do really like Kuzma. Think he should be probably higher owned than he is. Bilal Coulibaly is a way to get Wizards with, not having quite as much ownership. The pivots. DeMar DeRozan, 8.4K. When are they going to raise this guy's price? 68 last game. Did go into OT, but he was crushing before OT. And same story here. It is a tough matchup because it's versus the Clippers, but the guy can just get it done. He has so many 50-point games, so many high 40s, and only 8.4K. So definitely willing to go back to him, as is Beasley and Tobias Harris. Still has that 50, 60-point ceiling without Embiid and Melton. So I don't mind going there. If the 76ers are able to keep in the game, it is likely because Harris or Maxey really get it going. So, or both. Moving on over to small forward on DK, Hardaway, Thompson, Brooks. Thompson's fine. I like him. I do worry that he only played 23 minutes last game. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to the bench here, but it's a decent spot. Don't mind a little Thompson. Just don't go overboard with him. And matchup tool-wise, Jay Crowder, Chris Murray, Lou Dort on the top. Don't mind some... I really don't love any of these guys, but one of them could give you a fantasy score worth or needing, So they're fine. Don't mind it. Don't, absolutely hate any. Power forward, we got Denny, Jabari Smith, and Kyle Kuzma. So Jabari Smith, Kyle Kuzma, both going to be center. They're both going to be going against each other. I think it gives both of them a little more upside in rebound department as well as, scoring the basketball. So I do like both very much, as well as Tobias. And on to DK, Jabari Smith, Kyle Kuzma, Corey Crispert are the high-owned. Do got to say that Josh Green, PJ Washington are both much more interesting without Doncic. There's just a ton of usage that is going to be opened up. Kyrie already has a lot of usage, so he can't just take it all. It's going to be spread a little bit. I think PJ Washington becomes a much interesting piece, and I'd probably be getting a decent amount of him on DraftKings at this price with one of the higher game totals of the night. Don't mind going there whatsoever. And matchup tool-wise, Dylan Brooks, Giannis, Jalen Williams at the top. Giannis is obviously interesting. I just think it might be a little bit harder to get to him. Not on DK, it'll be fine. On FanDuel, it'll be hard. But Giannis does get a little bit of a boost without Middleton. And with no Doncic, his ownership is going to be a little bit higher because there is value on the slate. So just understand those dynamics if you choose to roll with him. Now on to the center spot. Nikola Vucevic, 31% owned. He probably should be the highest owned center. Don't mind going his way. Brook Lopez is one that's interesting to me. He hasn't done much lately, but he does have that ability to go off, and there's still no Chris Middleton, so the usage should still be there. Minutes should still be there as well. And a very sketchy pivot is Mo Bamba. He's playing 17, 18 minutes a game. He does absolutely have the ability to get a lot of steals and blocks. Not much has to go his way at 4K to make him worth it. And we haven't really seen that since, he took over this starting role. But we have seen him go off for, 30 points. And he can absolutely do it. All that needs to happen is him get busy quickly so he gets a couple extra minutes and just keeps that rolling throughout the game. And he absolutely can do it. So I don't mind today on a day where it's hard to get different to, take a little chance and go with some Bamba at low ownership. And on to DK, we got Gafford, Jabari Smith, Kyle Kuzma as the highest owned centers. I don't mind all of them. Gafford's usage should be up there a little bit. He did get 26 minutes last game, so he got a couple extra minutes. If he can get a couple more, he becomes super, super interesting, but he's been getting there in this low ownership or low minute environment, and he has a very good matchup. So Gafford's absolutely a little interesting here. Just wish he was coming in at lower owned on DK. Also got to bring up DeAndre Ayton right here. Guy has been crushing it lately. 260 burgers in the last 3 games, playing a ton of minutes in a spot versus the Knicks where Hartenstein, is decent. They're solid versus the center, but I think Ayton could get it done, and they may need him if, to keep in this game. Just from what we've seen, he has been a very center part of this offense lately. And don't mind going back to him here in this spot if he's low owned. One thing I do have to say is Ayton is kind of like notoriously a little bit lazy. And if you, there's just games where he doesn't try that much. And a lot of his back-to-backs, there's a much, a down game, so to speak, after in the second game of the back-to-back. He does have one game where he had a huge game in a back-to-back, but I do worry about that a little bit with him, the fact that it is a back-to-back and knowing that he just doesn't try some games. So it is a little bit of a worry, but he is an interesting game theory play. Now on to the matchup tool. Jabari Smith, Gafford, and Kuzma are the top of it. Those are my 3 favorite on DraftKings as well. On FanDuel, you can get them at forward, except for Gafford too. So you can keep open that center spot if you want and get a Mo Bamba or get another piece of Vooch or whatnot. So that'll do it for us today. All in all, it's a pretty interesting slate. I'm not a huge fan of these split slates, but at least this is a interesting one, and I wish you guys all luck. I'll be back here tomorrow. Let's make some money. Peace.